This SPA presentation aims to introduce the topic of unconscious bias and how staff and HE providers can manage the risk for admissions. I'm Lizzie Woodfield.
And I'm Dan Schaffer, and together we'll be taking you through this introduction on unconscious bias.
Firstly, an introduction to SPA. SPA was formed in 2006 following a government-commissioned review of fair admissions to higher education. One key recommendation from that review sums up SPA's aims, which are to be a central source of expertise and advise on admissions issues. SPA is staffed by practitioners with experience of the HE sector who offer evidence-based advice. Act as a resource for institutions. First and foremost, SPA is there to support HE providers in their efforts to improve professionalism and ensure admissions is fair. Lead the continuing development of fair admissions. SPA works with the HE sector to identify new and upcoming issues and then researches them so that informed advice is available to HE providers to help them maintain fair admissions. Spread best practice. There are many examples of good practice already out there, so SPA creates an environment to facilitate the sharing of practice and to save admissions staff having to reinvent the wheel. If you want to know more about SPA or look at our other resources, it's all freely available on our website at www.spa.ac.uk.
Let's start by thinking about what we mean by unconscious bias, who's biased, and how such bias might affect their judgment. Imagine you're going out for a meal, and then this person comes up to you. Do you A, run away, or B, strike first? Or do you C, pause to consider who this person is? After all, you shouldn't judge by appearances. Perhaps he's the chef. Maybe he's had an unfortunate accident and needs your help. Or maybe he's just passing by. If your answer is C, then well done. You've satisfied your intellectual curiosity. But you're probably dead. There are a lot of instances where our unconscious mind processes perceptions to help us make split-second decisions that are necessary.
Let's think of another example. Imagine you're driving along and then this person signals to you. Do you A, pull over, or B, speed past? Or do you C, pause to consider who this person is? After all, he is a stranger. Perhaps he wants a lift. Maybe he's just waving hello. Or maybe he's trying to steal your car. Again, there are many instances where responding immediately to stereotypes help us all function more effectively. This isn't just about basic survival tactics. Our unconscious biases are moulded to help us function as expected in society. We are usually aware of our actions, even if we aren't conscious of all the mental processes behind those actions. Imagine how chaotic life would be if we all had to get to know people as individuals before we knew how to react to them. Of course, stereotypes are flawed, our biases can be wrong, and assuming everyone fits a mould created by our unconscious mind can lead to overlooking individuals and perpetuating negative images. If you do an image search on Google for nurse, what sort of representation do you think you get? If you can do a web search now while still listening to this presentation, have a go. If not, take a moment to do it later. If you search hard, you may find a man in there, but predominantly we're looking at young, happy women. Some of them may even be deliberately eroticised. Take a moment to think about what other stereotypes are perpetuated by such imagery. Now let's do the same for engineer. You'll find it's mostly men and mostly in hard hats, because presumably that's the only sort of engineering there is. If these are the sort of stereotypes our unconscious minds have, we definitely don't want our conscious minds being influenced by them when marketing, recruiting, or selecting for HE entry. We also don't want potential applicants, their parents, or other advisors to think that's the only sort of person who becomes a nurse, or that's the only sort of person who becomes an engineer.
SPA has applied a definition of unconscious bias used by the Quality Challenge Unit. This states, unconscious bias refers to a bias that we are unaware of and which happens outside of our control. It is a bias that happens automatically and is triggered by our brain making quick judgments and assessments of people and situations influenced by our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences. As we've seen, these automatic responses are often helpful.
But in student recruitment, unconscious bias can lead to unfairly discriminating against individuals. Obviously, we don't want to do that, so the question is, how much are we influenced by our unconscious minds without even realising it? There hasn't been much research into the effect of unconscious bias from an HE student recruitment perspective yet, but there has been plenty conducted into staff recruitment. The Equality Challenge Unit has compiled findings from a range of research in their publication Unconscious Bias and Higher Education. I'd like to mention just two for now. As I do, please think about any inferences that suggest to you there may be a risk for student recruitment. Research by Wood et al. In 2009, which was commissioned by the Department for Work and Pensions, found that applicants with typically white British names were more likely to be shortlisted for jobs than those with names associated with minority ethnic backgrounds. Research by Moss-Rakusin et al. In 2012 identified that staff in one science faculty rated male applicants for a laboratory manager role as more competent than equally qualified female candidates. They also chose a higher starting salary for male candidates. In most of the research conducted, bias such as these examples occurred even when the individuals participating stated they did not hold discriminatory views. In other words, someone can be sexist, racist, or ableist, or other ists, even if they genuinely believe they are not.
It should be remembered that student recruitment is not the same as staff recruitment, so we need to be careful when inferring evidence from one onto the other. However, it does help to indicate areas we may wish to investigate further to assure ourselves and others that safeguards are in place. Student recruitment encompasses a wide span of engagement, covering large timescales, multiple activities, disparate staff, and large numbers of people not employed directly, all of whom have the potential to influence the choices made. SPA has highlighted that the risk of unconscious bias influencing an individual's entry into higher education lies not just with staff in HE, but also with applicants and their advisors. SPA has drawn up a table indicating some of the potential areas for unconscious bias in both HE applicants and HE admissions staff. It's not intended to be a comprehensive list, but may be a start for identifying a plan of action to target appropriate information, training, or other awareness-raising approaches. You can search for a copy at spa.ac.uk. It's worth spending a little time looking at the examples in the table and thinking about the wide range of views people hold that may block a person's progress, from aspiration raising, through selection, into higher education and beyond. Let's not forget, of course, that entry to HE inherently requires judgment, and it's not the best choice for everyone. We all want to admit students who will succeed in and benefit from studying with us. But that has to be evidence-based, not rooted in outdated, misunderstood, or simply false assumptions. Here are some examples of such assumptions. These may be assumptions held by the HE provider or by applicants and their advisors. Think about some of the comments you may have heard others make, including the media. Think about what difference such views make. Remember, people's conscious views may be influenced by unconscious biases that are deep-rooted. In other words, a viewpoint may feel natural, implicit, or a given, even if the unconscious reasoning behind it is flawed. For example, you might stick with a certain bank, even if it has worse rates and customer service, simply because you've always banked with them.
So what can we do about it? We'd like to go through 5 recommendations from SPA for tackling unconscious bias in HE student recruitment. They've been strongly tied to ECU's recommendations on staff recruitment for consistency. Hopefully you'll find you're already doing much of this across your institution. If you're not hitting these recommendations in your outreach, marketing, recruitment and admissions activity, then you can probably find good practice from another area you can readily adapt. Firstly, create a culture of equality. Having written equality and diversity policies is insufficient. Policies need to be put into practice. Managers should make it clear that they are committed to equality, holding themselves and others to account.
As with everything in your policies, it's important to ensure everyone involved adopts them and that any misunderstanding is corrected.
Ensure transparency. Ensure that all decisions, including interviews, are properly documented in a standard and consistent manner, and that they demonstrate why decisions were made. This will make providing feedback easier, facilitate any auditing process, and help protect against legal challenges.
Transparency makes both internal and external scrutiny easier. It makes it harder for an unconscious bias to creep into a person's actions without being noticed. But it also provides protection from unfounded challenges.
Reduce stereotypes. Look for situations where you can promote counter-stereotypical images of underrepresented groups without misleading applicants. This should apply not just on the website and in marketing materials, but also around the institution where they could be encountered by visitors.
We need to avoid tokenism, but at the same time we should be looking for ways to connect with different groups, especially those underrepresented in HE or in specific subjects.
Prepare individual selectors. Consider introducing training in a supportive, unthreatening environment to give staff the chance to think about their biases in a constructive way. Familiarity with non-stereotypical student, academic, or career examples will implant an intention to counter bias and promote a conscious effort towards equality.
I hope you're finding this a supportive, unthreatening environment. We mustn't make training feel like an attack that makes our own colleagues feel defensive. Instead, it should be about making us all more alert to the risks of unconscious bias influencing the choices and decisions everyone makes.
Last but not least, ensure the qualities of different candidates are valued in the same way. Before any selection decisions are made, all involved should be clear about what they are looking for, adhering to a robust admissions policy and consistent admission criteria that should not change within any period of equal consideration.
In a nutshell, you need to give the internal assurance and the external reassurance that you can be consistent in your recruitment and selection whilst also accommodating the wide diversity of applicants with the potential to succeed.
You might want to use SPA's action plan template as a guide. It's available on our website, spa.ac.uk. The template will take you through the 5 SPA recommendations and help you ask yourselves, what already exists? What needs to be created, updated, or expanded? Who will be responsible? What's the timeline? How will we measure success? If you already have staff training on unconscious bias, this may help to add an admissions dimension.
Thank you. Lizzie and I hope this session has been interesting and proves to be productive. At the very least, we hope you'll start looking at other people's views and perceptions a little more closely after this and continue to raise any potential risks unconscious bias poses to fair admissions. One final thought. Have you paid more attention to what I've said than to what Lizzie said? Studies show people are more likely to unconsciously favour points made by a man. A really good video from the Royal Society mentions this, along with other fascinating examples. You may wish to watch their unconscious bias video on YouTube.
Don't worry, I'm not offended, but we would like feedback on this presentation and any of our other resources, so drop us an email via inquiries@spa.ac.uk. A version of this is also available as a PowerPoint template on our website, in case you'd like to deliver your own workshop. Thanks for listening.